The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Victoria Jones from Satoshi's Page,
Hey, hey, everyone.
Rigel from Swan Bitcoin,
How y'all doing?
Amin Rafi from Bittopia University,
G'day, g'day.
Michael Carter from Bitspeak Trippin',
Hey guys, how's it going?
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one. Judge rules computer scientist is not Bitcoin inventor. Craig Wright is not Satoshi, according to a British court this week. The judge said he is not Satoshi. He is not the person who created Bitcoin. And he might even be guilty of carrying out a massive campaign of dishonesty and forgery, a major victory for the Crypto Open Patent Alliance, including Jack Dorsey's firm Block. Victoria Jones, what do you think about the major decision? It came suddenly. Craig Wright is not Satoshi Nakamoto, according to a British court.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the entire Bitcoin community is heaving a collective sigh of relief this week that it's finally over. This is a battle that's been going on for an incredibly long time and caused great distress to a number of people who didn't have Craig's resources. The fact that someone can really push lying to such an extent and the misery and aggravation that it causes in other people's lives, I just think is shocking. And I also think it's a very poor testament to our existing legal system that he was able to get away with it for so long. You know, basically what it's demonstrating is that, if you've got deep enough pockets, you can push this as far as it can take it. And ultimately, it took someone else with deeper pockets to eventually shut him up, which I think, is an appalling testament to exactly how our legal system works. So I'm glad that he's finally been shown up, but the fact that it's taken this long and this much to get it to that place, I think really is demonstrating to everybody, just exactly how many issues there are in our existing legal system, that this was even able to get this far. But ultimately, I'm glad that what we all always knew has now been proven to be correct.
I agree. He knew exactly where to sue. His earlier case in the Netherlands was less successful. When he sued in the UK, everyone was worried about the loose liable laws. It went very far. It was an involved and complicated case, perhaps unnecessarily, but it was great to see, as well as the C++ examples and other things that the lawyers brought out. Let's go to Rigel. What do you think about the decision by the British court?
Well, I'm absolutely shocked that he's not Satoshi. Absolutely surprised. As Victoria said, I think it's good. Look, it seems, I was shocked that he hasn't been declared like a vexatious litigant. I'm not sure if they have the same term in the British legal system, but basically, if you're someone that just sues for the sake of suing, at some point they can say, look, we can't take this guy seriously unless there's some extenuating circumstance, something like that. He can't bring lawsuits. And I would have thought by this stage, it would have got to that point from the amount of kind of obvious forgeries that have come out and the other stuff. But it's good that these guys got together and seem to have like really hit the nail on the head. The question for me is, what happens now in terms of like, do you know like what they were suing for, the crypto patent alliance, where there's like damages or what they're, because I mean, as I understand, it's a civil case, so like it seems he's committed, perjury and various other criminal acts, and so like he might be in trouble for that. But I don't think it's like will come as a result of what's just happened. So to me, that's the interesting question. I don't know if either of you guys have the answer for that, but it's great that he's been kind of kicked out, and he's obviously lost a lot of money on it. Well, Calvin Ayers' money, but the question for me now is, but what is the comeuppance for that? Can he just bring another case and do this again? And because he seems to have done that before, and despite obviously lying, hasn't been a barrier. So I would like to think this is the end of it, but I'm not sure if we have that answer just yet.
So far, I think the court has awarded or the Patent Alliance the legal damages. So Mr. Wright will pay for their court fees and so forth. As for what it really stops, I think it stops him making claims in the United Kingdom. Hopefully, as it's about patents with the Crypto Open Patent Alliance, it will stop him from suing on the patents. I don't think it'll stop him in general. I think he'll keep going. I think he'll keep suing on the patents. Don't know anything about Calvinair, but he's posted a goodbye tweet. But I don't know if that ever means goodbye, especially when you've invested so much money and so much time in a person and a cause and a thing. I think it keeps going in other countries. Min Rafi, what do you think about the British court decision on fake Satoshi?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, sweet. Look, this is a very sensitive topic for me because I just attended Anarchapulco where a great number of people were shilling Bitcoin SV and standing by the idea that somehow Craig Wright is the creator of Bitcoin and they have this really dramatic and sensitive story as to how he was played and his family was abused when they wanted to remain anonymous and now he's out to prove he's the real. I mean, when I heard this, so when I heard this, I wanted to know that I wanted to let people know everyone was arguing facts. Everyone was like, oh, you know, but he's like a scammer, he's a known this and that. And I wanted to say none of this matters. The fact that you have a blockchain with such huge block sizes and they seemed so excited that you could just post things for free, almost for free. I go, none of these are good. You shouldn't want things to be almost free. Why are you guys excited? That means for $1,000, I can spam your network. Like that is not what you want. How much junk is in your blocks? Why would you want videos on there? I don't understand where it was going. But they seem to be super excited about all of this, which blew my mind. Yeah, I'll turn it up. Is this better?
Oh, no, yours was good and loud. Rigel was soft, so you're wearing both.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. So it blew my mind how people even entertain this idea that somehow all of these are great things. You know, I'll just put it out there. Proof of work, there's a reason it exists. You don't want things to be super cheap because that means you can spam the network. You don't want that. And then they had some other forum where you could, on Bitcoin SV, back certain posts to make it show at the top of the thread. That's called like, you know, if you have a large sum of money, you could just censor a lot of people because you would just back the ones that you like. The whole system for me was such a joke that I went to our community and I just said, this is a friendly warning. So please stay away from Bitcoin SV, the real Satoshi vision. And that was actually 2 weeks ago. So I'm super happy to see this article come out. Great timing, because then now people will be like, oh. So I feel great is the real answer. I feel great.
I love that in the midst of all of fake Satoshi's alleged fraud, false claims, forgeries, not signing the contract and not moving the money, Amin is still mad about the block size. The real problem here is he's got too much block size. What's this guy doing? And my favorite part of this whole fake Satoshi thing, people might not remember, at one point, I think he told the journalists, go ahead and send a Bitcoin to the Satoshi address and I'll send it right back to you. And then it may have been 0.01 or whatever, but still that kind of thing. They're like, oh, of course, fake Satoshi, I'll send it. And then he's like, oh, no, I can't send it. I'm too busy. Or the keys are cut in half. They're being delivered on Thursday and it's raining. Back to the Future 3 stuff. But let's go to Michael Carter, Bitsby Trippin. What do you think about the decision by the British court?
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, it's been long overdue, right? I mean, I understand these things need to run their course and they need to have the due diligence. But I mean, the fact that this is still news, I mean, from all of this and it's taken this long, I think the majority of the consensus of most people out there understand that this was going to be the case. It was just a matter of going through the wickets of the law. And, you know, now people can now focus on, you know, other things. Is he going to stop? Probably not. It depends on, you know, how much this impacts him financially and any of his supporters, right? But, you know, how many losses can you take till you finally become so irrelevant that people don't even take the case type of thing? So I see it as it's always been a distraction with this. I think pretty early, it was pretty apparent that he was not it. He couldn't prove very key things that if you were, you'd be able to, you know, prove out. And then just some of the stuff that was on misquotes from the forums. I mean, when you're perpetuating a lie like this, like the amount of research and detail in a space that is so forensically looked at, right? That how are you going to perpetrate this? And you could see so many holes in everything that was said very early that, I think a lot of the folks that could look at that forensically knew that this wasn't the case. It was just a matter of getting it, balanced out to where a court system, folks that could hear the evidence could then, get to this ruling, right? But I think it's going to be good fodder for the all the feeds for a little bit and people pointing out certain things. But I don't think it'll be the last we're going to see him, unfortunately. But now I think the majority of people can kind of sit back and we'll see what comes out on the X and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. From all the folks that have been kind of holding back with the fear that they were going to get targeted, right? With like a few other folks have. So we'll see. We'll see how quick it dies off.
He was certainly a remarkable con man, a unique individual, much like other con men in the United States. He fools a lot of people. He has an answer for everything. If you tell him you're into fencing or you're into boxing, he's a world-class boxer. He's an expert fencer. He's great at billiards. He's just a fantastic guy. He'll sell you some ice if you're an Eskimo. He's got everything. So I think Carter previewed just a little there what the exit question is going to be. Will he stop? Is this the end? Have we seen the last of Craig Wright, Dr. Fake Satoshi Nakamoto, Victoria Jones?
No, probably not. I think, he's clearly got some form of mental illness. I think Proper Girls just said that in the chat. And people with mental illness, it's like they can't see reality, until someone puts them in a box and closes the lid. He'll probably continue as long as anyone's prepared to fund him, as long as he has a usefulness. And, in terms of creating uncertainty in the space, I think he's certainly had a role to play. It's good that someone's finally made a judgment, but I think if he can get away with continuing to make a noise, he probably will.
Rigel, is this the last we've seen of fake Satoshi?
No, I don't think so. And I think what Victoria was saying was very true. It's like a quick side tangent. 2016, whenever it was, when he they searched his house and he first came on the radar. I was like backstage at a concert and I was talking to a friend of mine that I had no idea he was into Bitcoin, and we just both found out at the same time. And he mentioned that he actually knew this dude, Craig Wright. It was like his cousin's brother or something like that, like kind of loosely connected. And according to him, he said that like this guy had some sort of, not autism or some sort of social disorder where like he's the sort of guy that will cry like fire in a theater for the effect of it, but doesn't like, autistic people like have difficulty kind of going 2 or 3 steps out as far as the social consequences of things, right? They see what happens in front of their face, but don't think about like what this might mean or how the people might react. So his what he told me was that he's one of these guys who just will do things, but he won't think about what the social consequences are, which seems to ring quite true, right? I think he's a guy who like says stuff and gets a reaction and thinks this is really great, but doesn't think, well, at some point this is going to come home to roost and I'm going to have something to, I'm going to have to sort this out. So if that is true, and ever since that happened, everything is done. I remember this all the time, and it seems to be very true. Then I think he's just going to keep. He's a guy that seems to like attention. And he just seems to say things to get a reaction, and people like that, as Victoria said, I think that they don't go away very soon. He's going to keep coming back until he's in jail or something like that, or he can't. So that would be my guess.
Well, certainly I've never met Craig Wright, and he's not my cousin. It is a fascinating story that if we in the Bitcoiners, as generally we've said, are right, and he's not Satoshi Nakamoto, and this whole thing unravels, what a Zelig-like character. What a unique and masterful personality to fool so many people, to hoodwink Calvin Ayre, presumably, to waste millions, hundreds of millions of his dollars, to have all these attorneys that are willing to go to bat for him, waste their time, their lives defending, attacking. What a story it'll be, and what a movie. This fantastic con man fooling all these people if it does unravel, if they can properly write about it, because he's currently very litigious, so there's probably not going to be a movie. Min, Rafi, what do you think? Have we seen the last of Craig Wright?
Evil knows no end, so I feel not. So what I would say is that the result of the question is in the market cap and the trading volume. That shows me how many people, in the town of a blind, the one-eyed man is king, and Craig Shorley was king in the town of the blind, unfortunately. So I don't think he'll disappear anytime soon, because that's just how these things work. And I think we need to also take into account how much of that money that he spent on the case was coming out of him selling Bitcoin SV on the market. So that would be interesting to figure out too. So maybe the people that were silly enough to purchase Bitcoin SV were also funding the court case, which would be even another layer of atrocity that, we can introduce. That's my thoughts.
In other possible con man news, we do have news from Hex and Richard Hart. I don't know the details, but I've heard something like the Hex that they bought wasn't the real Hex, and now the Hex that they bought has gone down 90%. So I don't know any details, but it doesn't look good for alleged con men these days. Michael Carter, you've already kind of said you think he's coming back, but what do you think? Is he coming back? Will it be soon? What's the future of Dr. Craig Wright?
Yeah, I don't think he stops until he's out of money, and then he'll probably drop to just doing YouTube videos or something to try to pitch his case or something.
That's think what mentally, I do.
Hey, we do. I do too. So it's okay. But I think he's going to have, anytime you have a polarizing character in general, you're going to have statistically people that are going to continue to follow him, believe in him. And I think that's if he firmly believes in his head, he's trained his brain to he's not going to stop pursuing it. And I just don't see him stopping. I mean, I don't know him personally. I've never had any interaction with him. But I just, seeing what I have seen so far, and the behavior in general, I don't think that's a person that just gives up easily, right? So I think he's going to just keep pursuing it, and maybe he'll find some lower court in another country, and then he'll try to catch a win somewhere, right? And then that'll be the next thing. And unfortunately, media is designed in general to highlight hey, he got this, right? So then it'll probably bubble back up, and we'll have to be talking about this maybe a year from now, who knows? But I just don't see him going away quietly.
I think you're right. I think he is compulsive. I think there's a lot more countries, a lot more courts, a lot cheaper courts, a lot more questionable courts. We could see all of that. And then I want to go full circle back to Woody Allen's Zelig. If you guys haven't seen it, Zelig is about a man who basically has no personality. If he meets someone, he immediately copies them and becomes them, whether the person's a man, a woman, tall, short, has a limp, any kind of thing. Zelig copies them. And it's an international delight. What an amazing person, this human copycat. And they, like you're saying, Michael, they try to stop him from being Zelig and stop him from being the copycat. And in the end, he always goes back. He always goes back to copying. Let us know in the chat if you've seen Zelig, if you think that Craig Wright's coming back. And it's a great time to give us a thumbs up, push like or retweet if you're on Twitter, whatever platform you're on. It's always great if you guys could spread the word and get more people to watch the show, and especially to join us in the chat and the conversation with the comments and stuff later. Moving on to issue 2. Issue 2, JPMorgan CEO issues shock Bitcoin reversal as $1 million price prediction is suddenly pulled forward. Yes, JPMorgan and their CEO, Jamie Dimon, is back in the news again this week, with Jamie Dimon himself altering his Bitcoin position, not yet positive, still different from his negative views of the past. He now says, I don't know what the Bitcoin itself is for, but I defend your right to smoke a cigarette. I'll defend your right to buy a Bitcoin. Rigel, what do you think about the continuing change in Jamie Dimon, who used to hate us and now seems to like us? And of course, the ever crumbling dominoes as bank after bank, as we predicted many times on this show, is suddenly getting into Bitcoin.
I think there's been like quite a few things that are like showing up on Twitter over the years, right? About like JPMorgan or various branches of it, like buying Bitcoin or Bitcoin related funds, stocks, businesses, or things like that. So I mean, obviously, like they're like, you know, there's one hand of like the public face, and there's the other one, which is like we want to make money. And I think if you want to make money, not being a Bitcoin is getting to the point now where it's kind of like your family and your fiduciary duty to your shareholders and you know, to other people that are, you know, particular money fund that are your customers, right? You know, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of split. Like, I'm the sort of guy that really hates the whole legacy finance world, and I think all this money macro stuff is kind of bullshit as far as I'm concerned. But I think like you have to also admit that like, and there's also people who are like extremely, you know, anarchist or whatever about this. But you got to admit like this is also part of how, if Bitcoin is going to win, this battle is going to be had, and it's got to be won, and this is how you do it, right? Is, you know, people like that may not like Bitcoin, but at some point the price starts to force their hand, and they must join the march, so to speak, onwards. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think the guy has probably has seen it as a financially advantageous thing to be involved in. But I mean, when you run a bank, like, what are you gonna say? Bitcoin's the future? Of course not. You know, you're gonna be trying to at least delay it until you've got a strong position, right? You know, so it doesn't surprise me at all. And I think we'll just see him get weaker and weaker on it.
As a Bitcoiner, and especially a longtime Bitcoiner, you have to love it that he still doesn't get it with all his finance degrees and being CEO and hundreds of $1,000s a year, whatever he makes, millions of dollars. I'm sure he's very well off, but he still doesn't get it. We love it. But I agree with Roger that we can't see over his shoulder to see his balance sheet. We don't know what he's really doing. And we heard years ago his daughter or something like that was investing. So we don't know how much she has. And daddy gives her a gift and she holds on to it. We have no idea. Min Rafi, what do you think about JPMorgan Chase and, of course, their CEO, Jamie Dimon?
Yeah, look, just before I say something, doesn't it represent the firm that manipulates the silver and gold prices? Yeah, doesn't JP Morgan contribute to the silver prices and keeping the prices down for the gardeners how many years in the past? Does anyone know anything about this on the show? Yeah, for me...
Yeah, I think he's heavily invested in silver, aren't they, JP Morgan?
Yeah, and I think they manipulate it, like they keep it down on purpose for a very long time.
There was a case where they did say officially that the silver was manipulated and held down, not just a libertarian theory or fantasy. So I do agree with that. I don't have the details.
Yeah. So, I mean, end of story. You know what I mean? Who cares what he's saying? I think people really need to stop caring about what these people are saying and assume that they somehow know what they're saying. They're just Muppets. They're just Muppets who have been put there to yap their mouth and say certain things that they're paid to say. They're not important. They're not smart. They really don't have really any value apart from being a Muppet that just goes on TV and yaps their mouth. That's all they do. So from that aspect, great job. He's a very entertaining guy. He could do well in Hollywood or something, you know, away from real serious stuff. But when it comes to serious stuff like Bitcoin, yeah, I mean, he said it himself. He doesn't even know what he does. So that already shows like his level of intelligence. It's been 10 years. There's many books out there. You know, Andreas Antonopoulos has written many books about Bitcoin. It would take him probably 15 minutes. He could have someone even summarize it for him in a bullet point. He's an executive. He has people that summarize things for him. So, you know, that's really, I don't really have much to say. I don't really care about this guy. So
it is great that his go-to for Bitcoin, which used to be a pet rock or rat poison or just going to destroy you and make you lose all your money, now it's cigarettes, this, you know, poisonous, addictive chemical substance, not something like Bitcoin that can free people, help people, you know, make a little money here and there, get out of their situation, accept money on the internet, so many different uses, remittances, all that kind of thing. Carter, what do you think about his comments on Bitcoin? And maybe he's coming around. He says it's just like cigarettes now.
I think he'll be one of those long holdouts too. And then once everything's regulatorily approved, especially when it gets down to custodials at banks, then it'll be one of those things that he'll have to more positively comment on because it'll be a service offering that they have. But Yes, it was. There was a question earlier about the gold manipulation. So JPMorgan in 2020 had a $920 million fine from the SEC for manipulating the precious metals market in general. So it's not just gold, it's everything. And I think that when you get to such a size of a company like that, there are a lot of heads to that Hydra type of thing. And there are different groups and management incentives and things that cause certain probably leadership to make really bad decisions, sometimes even fraudulent decisions. And then you got the head of the piece there that has to either defend it or have a position that supports, their core tenant or core business. And I think I think personally, he, just from the comments that he's made, especially recently, where he keeps getting this question. He was just on CNBC not too long ago, and they were kind of hitting him pretty hard with it. And he's like, he looked genuine when he says, I just don't care about it. Like I think in his world, like it doesn't matter, but he keeps getting asked to have an opinion on it because of who he is. But I think one of those things that, it's an old dog, new tricks type of thing too, to where he's very set in like what traditional old school finance is. He's comfortable in that space, doesn't want to really understand and what the innovation is that comes with Bitcoin. But I think from a JPMorgan in general, not just that's separating Jamie Dimon from that picture, they're a business and they're going to have to partake in it. And provide services, custodial services for folks that are not going to go deep dive and have their own wallets. And they're going to be part of it. So, I mean, that's where there's always a conflict whenever people bring up his own company. Like, well, your company did this, you said this, but then they went out and bought Bitcoin and these different, instruments that you guys could buy it in. So how's that reconciled? And he's like, well, I don't talk to everybody, how much knowledge does he have? How much is it where he can manipulate? We do know that those folks at that scale, Warren Buffett, folks like that, have a lot of, just by what they say when they come on, they can move a market. There are a lot of institutional investors that follow what they do. So, it seems, I don't know if we're ever going to convince him or if this is like a pet project for all of us to try to get Jamie Dimon to come over. I don't know why, but it's just part of that narrative since of the, him being a CEO of that large of a company. I don't know. I think as everybody on this panel probably agrees, the traditional finance system needs a full rework, and it goes not just to the financial system, it also goes to the taxes. There's a lot of things that need to be modernized. And it's one of those things that that Bitcoin is a strong forcing function to make certain things where it's going to become relevant to make changes to it, because it's going to just outdo a lot of these current instruments. People are going to look at this as a store of value, as an asset class for transfer, and it's happening with or without them. And now they're just having to become a participant in it, right? So I think it's going to be interesting over the next few years, especially when banks start to become custodials for folks and have to take positions of coins and provide services from their side on it. And JPMorgan for sure will be part of that, no doubt.
It just must be haunting. You said no years ago, you didn't buy, you keep saying no, you keep not buying, and yet people keep asking about it. Like I was saying, the journalists keep calling you up and asking you about this Bitcoin. And it's this almost devilish torture, like a banker hell dream where you didn't invest and you said no publicly and they keep asking. Victoria Jones, last week, Cuban said that Bitcoin was bananas. Diamond says that it's cigarettes. But of course, now in prison, they trade stamps or mackerel, like Max. Diamond needs to stay up to date, right?
Well, I mean, I have a slightly contrarian view of the whole situation. I think Jamie Dimon understands exactly what it is. But of course, his job is to be the face of the existing financial system, and Bitcoin completely disrupts the existing financial system. And I think part of their hope has been that it would die before it reached that full potential. And of course, it's getting closer and closer to actually fulfilling its destiny. And I think, they're starting to kind of go, this wasn't supposed to happen. Now what do we do? You know, I think he's flip-flopping on his opinion. It's almost like he can't make his mind up because you know, I think they were in their arrogance hoping that, you know, Bitcoin would die a death all by itself, but it's not. It's getting stronger, and of course the stronger it gets, the more of a threat it is to their existing system. And so I totally understand why he spouts a contrarian opinion. You know, the only tool they've now got in their toolkit is to try and keep people away from it based on their existing reputation. But of course, by the time everyone figures out that what they say means nothing because we've got a whole new reality that's being birthed, then, you know, their previous opinions will just speak for themselves and they'll lose all credibility. You know, the world is on the brink of realizing that these guys are completely untrustworthy. And the more people do their own research and start to realize that actually this is the way it's going and you need to think for yourself and not rely on what they're telling you, the better off you're going to be. So, you know, more for you if you want to listen to Jamie Dimon. You know, anyone who's done their own research now realizes that you can't trust what they say. You know, the sooner you figure that out, the better off you'll be.
It does seem like they're evil villains and we're just about to pull their mask off and they say, oh, I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you kids and that dog, Bitcoin. It all comes back to Scooby-Doo. But let's go on to the exit question. What will happen first? Jamie Dimon giving in or Bitcoin breaking $1 million? Bonus aspect, predict when on the chart he will give in. Rigel, when does Jamie Dimon break?
I think well before $1 million, dude. I mean, you know, you would guess it's somewhere at the minimum into the 300K. He's got to do a complete reversal, or just say like, hey, you know, I don't get it, but we're doing it, you know, something like that. So I don't know what that point would be. You know, just purely on like numbers and the power of like round numbers, I would guess 100,000 is going to create some headlines and some talk, you know, that whether, you know, happens bang on 100,000 or not, I wouldn't say that's going to be the trigger, but like that would start the discussion, I would say. Certainly well before $500,000, I would guess. But the real question I think for all this is like those wheels take a while to set in motion, right? Like say today he decided that they're going to do it. It's going to take them at least a couple of weeks to get their product launch and, you know, all the other stuff behind the scenes together. You know, like to bear in mind is, you know, obviously, I mean, I think everyone here knows, you know, this is probably not going to continually go up forever. It's going to go too far and then come down, and then we're going to have probably a bit of a bear market for a while. Those kind of things as well can affect those decisions of like, I believe, you know, there's been other institutions or things that like had a product ready to launch and then the bear market happened. They're like, oh, well, the shelf this for the moment. So that's the only thing I think might affect it. But I think a lot quicker than you'd think. If these changes take like that, I mean, I think it's not very far at all, to be honest.
I think you're right. He'll definitely do it at a time that's convenient to Jamie Dimon, a time where he will make money personally in some way. But we've got 100,000 to 500,000 range so far. Amin Rafi, predict the future. When will Jamie Dimon give up?
Yeah. Look, I just want to add some layers to that. First of all, when we say $1 million for Bitcoin, I have to assume that the dollar has dropped in value so much that it has become worth $1 million. And that $1 million could be represented by 100,000 today. So that's something that people don't put into the equation. Like Cliff High says, when silver for an ounce is in 3 digits, that's a very different world you're going to be living in. That doesn't mean that necessarily it's worth 3 digits. That could also mean that the dollar has devalued itself so much that now it's represented by a higher number. And that for me is something that I like to keep in mind. Now, the second layer I want to add to that is, for example, with the BlackRock and institutional purchasing, which a lot of people get excited about, but they don't see the other side of the coin, which is that in the US, from my research, I could be wrong, half of the real estate is owned by financial firms. Now, that's very worrying, and people should worry about that. That means we are no longer representing things by how much they're actually worth, but how much the market sets it to be worth. And I see examples of this in Australia where a lot of people think they have somehow gained this magical wealth in the last 2 or 3 years. But what they don't realize is that a dollar is now worth 30 cents. So it's not to be excited about because you see larger numbers for what you have as assets, but rather that your dollar has debased itself and become worth a lot less. That's another perspective that sometimes people miss. Now, if BlackRock is getting into cryptos, what it could also mean is that they could definitely manipulate it for both good or bad, the price of Bitcoin. So a lot of people also get excited about BlackRock buying Bitcoin, but they don't understand that Aladdin, for example, has $500 billion worth of assets, probably more now. That was a few years ago, under its control, worldwide assets. That means they can control the entire market of the world, whether it's housing, precious metals, whatever they've bought. Aladdin is told to purchase. So with that in mind, I just want to bring it back to reality with those functions. I would say JPMorgan coming onto Bitcoin, I don't think they will. I don't think they will come around. And if I had to guess, I would say probably when it reaches $1 million. And it won't be a good news from them like, oh, it's $1 million, we've decided to jump on. For me, it would be more like we have no choice. And there will probably come a day where, I just want to add another layer to this. In Fox News, what was the guy that left Fox and then he created his own show?
It could be O'Reilly or it could be Tucker Carlson. Yeah.
Tucker. Yeah. So he had this clip on TV once where he was showing how the reason price of Bitcoin was climbing back a year ago or whatever it was because there is a lot of ransomware requests. So the United States government has to go and purchase Bitcoin off the market to pay these hackers. And I thought that was absolutely stupid. It's like you're dealing with a country. Of course, they have reserves. They're not going to go onto Coinbase and be like the US government account on Coinbase and buying Bitcoin. Like they buy this stuff OTC. So the fact that you can even relate to those two is just silly. So I think all of these people have Bitcoin. You would have to be very silly to not. It would have to be very, very silly. And these people are not silly when it comes to finance. So I'm pretty sure they have reserves. They just don't acknowledge it. It's just a risk. What do they call it? In terms of risk management, you have to. You would be silly to not. So he will probably deny it and then at $1 million beg for it. So that's my outcome.
I do agree. It's a matter of risk management. Many people saying that 1% or 10% of your portfolio should be Bitcoin, but they might be very silly. They might be very silly men. So we've had 100,000 to 500,000, $1 million or never. Carter, when will Jamie Dimon, when will he give up? When will he join Bitcoin?
I didn't think Peter Schiff would ever say the same thing of admitting to it, but I think one of the last things that he was just on just said that, yeah, I kind of missed the boat on Bitcoin, and he's been pretty heavy on gold. I think Jamie will be kind of the same thing. But I think it's going to take a little, I don't think it's going to be the market pushing him there more than it is probably his own family wearing him out. I think the family's going to have a lot more influence on him than, CNBC or watching anything online. But I don't see him really coming over, if not being just one of the long-term holdouts of like, I don't care. I don't care if it's $1 million, $2 million. I don't care that if our company's involved in it or not. He's just going to personally choose not to be. I think he's kind of had that standpoint, like live on TV multiple times, including just recently. I think now it's going to become to a point of principle for him just not to do it. Is that smart? Obviously, we know that that's probably not the most smartest thing, but he's going to have his conviction, I think, too. The same way I don't think Craig's going to give up going after saying he's, Satoshi. I think that's where his mind's at, just based on the interviews I've seen from him. We know that just from stuff that's out on the market that JPMorgan does buy, cryptocurrency. They've had that. They've made purchases. It's documented that they've made purchases into crypto. Once financial services are available for, the rank and file banking system, then the company itself will be involved in it. It makes no sense. We just seen Vanguard CEO have to get walked out, right? Like, because they chose not to do the ETF, and then Bitcoin goes from 40 to 73, and everybody's just like, where are you guys at? And they walk their CEO out. So I think all of the financial institutions are going to start to collapse around it and make it part of the portfolio. But yeah, for Jamie Dimon himself, personally, I just don't see like him conceding it. I think he's a proud person and he's not going to do it just because of it. But you know, I think in general, like from a risk management, standpoint, there was that risk discussion brought up. There are, so for companies that are out there, and like as an example for ours, like we use from an insurance standpoint, we have Berkshire Hathaway for a lot of our mining farms. That's through a company 3. On our errors and emissions portion of that, there is now additional coverage for, if you're, impacted from, hacking or anything like that that happens on your systems. You pay, an extra premium for that to be covered from any kind of nefarious activities like that. That includes cryptocurrency. So on that, which is, from Berkshire Hathaway to 3 to the company handling the additional insurance, they actually have coverage now to cover you down. So if you did get impacted in that way, you would be just paying your normal, normal stuff. And then they're covering down on the cryptocurrency cost, right? So they would actually be sending it. So I think that's the way a lot of these companies are going to be structured versus holding it on their books for those type of things. I think companies would hold it on their books on the finance side of just being diversified from, essentially what like MicroStrategy and folks do, where they put it on the balance sheet. That's going to be different than risk management. And usually risk management, you're going to use a third party for that to do the insurance side. So, and I'm just trying to make the audience aware that exists right now. And if you're a business and you have that, you can actually select that for protection. So, just that was not a thing 2 years ago, as an example. Like it was like, they were like, what, you want cryptocurrency protection? Seeing those things start to fall into place when it comes to the structure of just business and finance, seeing how much progress has been made just in the last 2 years. Yeah, I think the next year, we're going to see a lot more advancement in that integration. So, yeah, Jamie, I don't see him coming over, man. I don't care if it's $1 million or more. I think he'll hold his ground.
Well, it's really cool that you can work with Berkshire Hathaway, even if it is through an intermediary. Obviously, I think Warren Buffett's going to hodl his hatred until his grave. But Jamie, come on, you're a young man. Victoria Jones, do you think Jamie Dimon will come around?
Nah, he'll go down with the ship. He'll hold on right till the end. It's like, no, I never saw the point in that Bitcoin thing, because the thing is, by the time Bitcoin takes over, what Jamie Dimon has to say will be irrelevant. He'll probably be hiding in a bunker somewhere, hoping we're not chasing him.
Like they said in the Hitchhiker's Guide, they would be the first ones against the wall when the revolution comes. And then a copy of the Encyclopedia Galactica that had been dropped through a time warp said they were the first ones against the wall when the revolution came. It's a big difference. Moving on to issue 3. Bitcoin could drop to $58,000 as a cool-off period is imminent, Swissblock says. The Bitcoin price nearly doubled since late January, but a counter move seems to be near. Amin Rafi, what do you think about the price of Bitcoin?
Yeah. So, yeah, different perspectives. I've been doing some research. Some say that how many was it, like 40,000 or so, or 20,000 Bitcoins that was seized in 2022 because of the Silk Road and other things that I read about. Some say that the current pump is caused by BlackRock pumping the market so that the government can sell the Bitcoins that they had seized. And that was the only reason for this pump. Other people say it's like institutional buyers coming in. Finally, it's standardized and regulated enough so big people can come in. I don't know. I don't really have a view on these things. I just think it's strange times, and I feel like the financial system is reaching its last few years. Whether that means a reset and introduction of a digital system, which is on the table, or shift to decentralized currencies, which I don't think will happen on a large scale like that. I don't know. So my answer would be I'm in it since 2013. So Long term, it's going up. Unless the dollar gets screwed. I don't know what the plan. Does anyone have any theories? What happens if the dollar like gets, if all these countries are shifting to Chinese yen and these things? I don't know. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one.
Well, I do agree with you. I think long term it goes up, but if $1 million buys you a hamburger, what good is it? Let's go to Carter from Bitsby Trippin. What do you think about the price of Bitcoin and the large potential drop?
I think there's a lot of various macro things going on. The ETF obviously has that a large impact on this market. I mean, there's people that are tracking outflows, OTC orders, the fact that some exchanges have been halting Bitcoin purchases because they're out of Bitcoin. I saw Uphold had that for a little bit there. I saw Exodus, which is, decentrally, you can do exchanges through the Exodus app. There was a couple times where you couldn't even do an exchange decentrally because there wasn't enough spot out there to cover down. There was too much, float in the price. I just think there's a higher demand on it right now. I mean, it is pre-halving. We typically wouldn't see, a large increase past all-time highs until usually after it. So this might be a little bit of the buying the news, selling the event. But unlike other times in those halving events, there's way more infrastructure. We do have the ETFs in the US, way more onboarding ability. I mean, if you think about just the 2017 cycle, in December of 17, I think most people that were around at that time knew, like, when it was peaking at all-time high, I mean, Coinbase like clockwork goes down, but like everything was like BitMEX, Binance was just starting. Nobody could get any, you couldn't get any orders through anywhere during all-time high. This round, it was pretty subtle besides a few of the bigger jumps, and Coinbase hits the circuit breakers, right? But Binance didn't have any issues. Kraken, a few of the others didn't have any issues. So, there's way more robustness to the network now. In addition, there's way more folks that are onboarded to be able to purchase. You got Robinhood, you got all these other different entities to allow, custodial holding going on. So, I think it's a mix of that narrative is pushing it. I think it's one of those things, once it starts moving, it really starts moving. But the sell-off piece, I don't know. There's some of that part of the ETFs is the incentive to balance the market a little. I think this most recent today sell-off, I saw a report on Twitter yesterday that the longs were close to 80% versus the shorts at 20. That anytime that happens, you're going to have somebody come in there and try to market maker wreck the market, right? They're going to go take that money. So it needs to be balanced more around a 60-40 split, 50-55-45 split. So when you get a really unbalanced from longs and shorts, you're going to have people go and that our market makers make some some moves. And I think that's what we're seeing now. So I don't see it ratcheting too heavy back. What's interesting being in the Bitcoin mining space and seeing hash price and equipment and availability versus all the other times, price has went up a lot. But to give you an idea, last year we were purchasing machines for around $500 to $800 used. The market's the same right now. Like literally, I got a buy order out for S19J Pros as an example, $4.88 a T, right? So for 100 terahash units, it's $488, and that's at near all-time high prices, right? And hash price is pretty decent compared to where it was at. So with the difficulty, so it's interesting that the selling side of the market for hardware hasn't really reflected the fact that we're at all-time highs. Even though the margins have increased better, granted, hash rate has went up a lot. So I look at it like I don't think it's going to pull heavily back. And I think we're going to ratchet higher. I think we're going to end this year over 100 grand. So that's just where everything seems like it's going, and the right momentums are in the right places. So I think that's where we're at.
Victoria Jones, the price of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said on a couple of shows previously, I think the rise that we're seeing at the moment is pretty unprecedented. I mean, Bitcoin's never breached an all-time high prior to the halving before. And part of the issue is we've now got financial institutions involved who have very deep pockets. But of course, as far as they can push the price up, they can also do the same thing on the way down. And so, I think this extreme heights in the price is an indication of extreme volatility, and it could easily go down in the other direction. I think the other thing we also need to bear in mind is that the financial system really does seem to be teetering. I know a lot of people have been talking about that forever, and we're all waiting for the moment that it goes down. But it's like every day that passes, it seems to get more and more precarious, and it's almost like we're just waiting for that final moment. And I think when that final moment happens, I think in the short term, the price of Bitcoin could actually suffer. There are a lot of people in the world who have their debts denominated in US dollars. And in that kind of situation, if all the banks have gone down, the only asset they have that is convertible into dollars is Bitcoin, you could suddenly see a really strong sell-off in the price. So yeah, I think you have to be prepared for every single scenario. I mean, I often have people reach out to me asking me what to do with their Bitcoin investments. And I think it's great long term, but don't have everything in Bitcoin. You need to be diversified because, as much as it can go up in that direction, which is great, it can also go in the other direction. And so, you might think, "Way, fantastic, I've now got all this money I didn't have." But, when it reverses on you, it's heartbreaking. And most Bitcoiners have been in the space for long enough have experienced that in one way, shape, or form. So yeah, just be careful out there. Don't get too emotional. Keep a sane head on your shoulders. If it's being really volatile, it's for a reason, and you need to be mindful of that. That would be my advice.
And let's go to Rigel. Do you think you will see a major pullback in the Bitcoin price?
Yeah, I'm not much of a tea leaf reader when it comes to this stuff, but I mean, it does seem, as everyone else has said, like to me to be a little prematurely overextended. Certainly, I think it's like 48K or something like that. I was saying to my friend, I was looking at like the weekly candles, and there'd never been, maybe I think 2011 there was an example, but there'd never been that many consecutive green candles, and I was expecting it to kind of have a bit of a nasty pullback, and it kind of just consolidate and keep going. So, this, as far as, the halving thing, I think it's a little overhyped, but it's not nothing. And the fact that we are as far along about getting back to previous all-time highs as we are now, I mean, I think, it wouldn't surprise me to see a pullback like they were suggesting. And yeah, so yeah, I wouldn't presume to be able to predict, but it wouldn't at all surprise me to see that. But I would certainly think that eventually we'll go much higher before we're done.
And we might be joined by Josh in Australia. And of course, time has changed in America. We have this crazy daylight savings time thing. They move time forward and back an hour a couple times a year. But now it's your time to predict against the Bitcoin predictor ball, the source of all truth and knowledge in this universe. Amin Rafi, will the price of Bitcoin be higher or lower this time next week?
Let me think. It's gonna be higher.
Let's go to Carter from Bitsby Trippin. Higher or lower?
I think it'll be higher. I think it's going to recover.
Victoria Jones, a recovery in our future?
No, I think we could maybe have a bit of a breather for a while. It's been on a good run. I think maybe down a bit next week.
And Rigel, higher or lower?
I just checked. It says like 67,000 at this moment, and so to me that seems like a little quickly pulling back from where it was. So I'd be thinking it would be similar, if not slightly higher, would be my guess. But I don't think it's going to be dramatically different.
And Josh Agala joining us from down under after the United States has randomly changed times. Higher or lower?
Yeah, well, if I know one thing's lower, it's going to be SV. That's for sure. Wow. Yeah. What's with the time zones, guys? Forget the cows. Forget the cows. Think about the businessman for a while. We're global now.
We've got to save daylight, even though we've got LED electric lights that hardly use any electricity at all. Nothing like the old filaments. But let's keep going. Check out worldcryptonetwork.com, where we've got 3,599 videos, including this one, which happens to be number 400 if you're into arbitrary round numbers. Moving on to issue 4, El Salvador to transfer a big chunk of their Bitcoin to a physical vault. Let's go to Carter from Bits Be Trippin'. What do you think about the plans for El Salvador to transfer their Bitcoin to a physical vault?
They're going long-term holdo, I guess. Getting it makes me wonder where they were storing it before. But yeah, no, I think I think that they're really focused on the long term on it. I think folks in the beginning thought it was a stunt, but I think what we're seeing in El Salvador really is leaning into the space, trying to incentivize folks to come to the space to do come down there, do some work, and they're staying in for the long haul. I think it's a good move. Have a good treasury for it, and I think it's like anybody that's had a lot of like either old school Bitcoin and you're holding on to it forever, and at some point when you go to use it, using it as leverage or borrowing power versus selling your stats or immediately replacing them. I mean, that's been kind of the mantra I've used for a long time. Is if I spend it, I do have to spend Bitcoin sometimes, but I try to replace it as fast as I got it. And sometimes I catch dips like this where there's a pullback, but I think this is a good move for him.
Breaking news. I was so distracted by Josh joining, I forgot to predict the future for you. So very quickly, will the price of Bitcoin be higher this time next week? We asked the Bitcoin predictor ball, the source of all truth and knowledge in this universe. Will it be higher? Better not tell you now. Better not tell you now. It's a good thing that we asked. Let's keep going. Josh Shigala, what do you think about El Salvador? They're putting it in a vault. Oh, gotta unmute yourself.
Noob. When we ran Vaultoro, which was the first Bitcoin physical gold exchange that was launched back in 2015, and obviously gold, big vaults, Switzerland, solid stuff. But at the time, the ECB had negative interest rates, and all the banks were storing their fiat at these private vaulting institutes because it was cheaper. The vaulting fees were cheaper than sending it back to the ECB because then they'd have to pay negative interest rates. So there was pallets and pallets of just paper sitting in these vaults. In terms of Bitcoin, you don't need pallets of nothing. So I don't know. It sounds like a decoy to me because that's part of a security profile of having a decoy. You say, here's the big, chunky, massive vault, but it's actually in a multi-sig with a few like deposit boxes around the place. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of governments in general holding Bitcoin because it's so easy to take the whole nation at ransom if you get voted out or something. Like there's a whole different profile of risk for governments doing this thing called Bitcoin. Hey, maybe with the new signatures, we can have like massively multi-sig where every user, every member of society has to sign to vote. Maybe that'll be the way.
I think Josh has got a good point. We've all played the video game and we know what happens at the end. Sorry, Mario, your princess is in another castle. Victoria Jones, what do you think about El Salvador putting it in a vault?
Yeah, well, I mean, given where we are in history, that probably seems like a reasonable thing to do. But, Bitcoin is going to completely disrupt the nation state. And, all you're waiting for is someone to run off with a private key and that's it. And it's gone. So, you just, in the short term, it may be fine while the infrastructure exists. But I think we're entering a time in history where almost anything could happen. So yeah, it seems like a reasonable thing to do right now. But in terms of, you know, how that plays out long term, anything could happen. Anything could happen.
Let's go to Rigel. What do you think about the decision of El Salvador to go with physical security for their Bitcoin?
I mean, yeah, I heard a rumor, I'm not sure if this is true or not, that it was in BitGo and another custodian previous to this. So I mean, I think it's good that, like, at least for the nation of El Salvador, that they're taking it more seriously as they should. You know, I mean, you can't really have like a sovereign asset with a nation state that's, you know, with a leader that's not afraid to kind of poke at the United States and other things and have your assets sitting, you know, as we've seen with gold. I think it was with Venezuela and Germany, or no, England, I think it was, where they tried to get a bunch of gold back and England's like, oh, no, sorry, you know. So, I mean, I think it's positive. It's doing it the right way. But I mean, on the other hand, I'm also quite skeptical about the hype about El Salvador. And Bukele is definitely a master propagandist. And so, like, this is what he said he's done and everything. But I mean, how can we, you know, we've seen it, we see an address, but that could easily be an address. He could have just gone to BitGo and say, hey, what address is there, you know, our Bitcoin sitting in? And there it is, right? You know? So, yeah, as far as all the details of it and thinking that it's great, I mean, it's a great statement. You know, how true or how well secured it is another matter. But at least, you know, I think as someone was saying, at least it shows that, you know, this is true and they get it at face value. They're taking it seriously, and I think this is the way. If Bukele wants to do what he's trying to do, it's a very wise strategic move. But also, as mentioned, you know, it's much easier to steal than, you know, whatever millions of dollars that is of gold, or certainly to try and steal it by the legacy banking system. All it takes is, let's just say hypothetically, 2 or 3 multi-sig is what's used. It just takes us 2 people colluding and, you know, getting on a plane, and you know, a country like El Salvador is going to have a slightly harder job of getting that back. So I mean, this is the other thing is, you know, that's the ultimate level of security, right? Is if you're an institution, someone steals your money, you can go to the government and there's some degree of recourse available, right? But if the United States, for example, was to somehow break into this bunker and steal the Bitcoin, there isn't anything they could do at all. I mean, they could declare war on the United States, but good luck. So it's an interesting security question as well. I think it's interesting from that perspective of, like, if you're a nation state, how do you secure this thing, which theoretically, you know, you think about some of the pretty powerful nations out there, it wouldn't be that difficult for them to get in and steal billions of dollars worth of money much easier than it would be in other forms. So that's another interesting question.
It seems like a pretty complicated solution to the problem of the finance minister keep panic selling and panic buying. He buys it, he sells it, he buys it, he sells it. They try to keep it away from him. He just keeps doing it. Amin Rafi, what do you think about their solution to put their Bitcoin in a physical vault?
Yeah, I think my answer combines a lot of these different answers. First of all, I would really advise Bitcoin fans to really take into account that ETFs, as much as they wanted it, because the price of Bitcoin will go up, will have very negative impacts on Bitcoin itself. Because then you have Bitcoin being traded without actual Bitcoins being traded. Like, you have more silver being traded in one day than there is silver being produced in an entire year. So it depegs itself from reality. The other problem that I have with some Bitcoin people is they get excited when nations adopt it. They're like, oh, what if India adopts it? What if China adopts it? They forget that Bitcoin and digital decentralized cryptocurrencies were supposed to be bottom up. We don't want a top-down solution. That is not something we want.
All right, I think we might have lost a minute at the end there. I was going to ask you guys as an exit question of how much money, allegedly, would the dictator or someone else steal if they were to steal it? But I think Rigel's right. They'd steal it all. They'd steal it all. And I just want to second what Victoria and Rigel said. Working backwards, maybe seeing this from the future, the dictator who overruled the Supreme Court, who decided it was okay for him to run for an extra term, even though it doesn't say so, who jailed all the people, anybody with a tattoo, Sorry, Rigel, not looking at you. But yes, if you were in Venezuela, or sorry, if you were in El Salvador, it's very possible you would have picked up just because of a tattoo. That same guy, the guy who's going to get volcano power to run his miners, might run off with the Bitcoin. So if we're watching this in the future and we're saying, wow, they moved it to a vault, we'll see this as one of the key steps to where if you were reading it backwards, you'd be like, of course, when they moved it to the vault, there was some kind of an accident or Rambo attacked, or, we lost it, or a boating accident, some kind of problem. But again, that's just the future. We have no idea what will really happen. Best of luck to El Salvador. I do agree with libertarians and others who've said it's nice. It's a good positive message that they're holding it, and they're holding it in cold storage. But I do worry that it makes it much, much easier to steal. They still have options. They have keys and multi-sig and all that. But we'll see how it goes. Remember how powerful that wrench attack is. Moving on to issue 5, MicroStrategy's debt-fueled Bitcoin purchases could make a future downturn worse, says our buddy JPMorgan, who's just everywhere today. JPMorgan worries, and I worry a little as well, that someone like MicroStrategy, or anyone really, no offense meant, holding all the Bitcoin, holding lots of Bitcoin, could give us problems, especially when they bought that Bitcoin on debt. Even though if I could borrow $1 billion, I'd do the same. Josh Shigala, what do you think about MicroStrategy? Is it a risk to Bitcoin that they hold so much?
Not really. I mean, it's 21 million. I don't think they're close to that. It's a problem for proof of stake coins if there was an ETF with proof of stake coins, because then you have vastly massive voting power against the chain. But I mean, for volatility, it's a problem, I guess, because like Amin was stating, if you can buy thousands of Bitcoin at a time, you can also dump them at a time, and you can also market sell just a few of them to cause a cascading effect at a time around fear. So if you know that there's a bad news event, trigger a domino and then buy it up while everyone's panicking. It's just old school stuff. Everyone knows these games these large players play. And funnily enough, I mean, Bitcoin's had whales since the start. And so is every other altcoin. So people are used to the fact that that the markets are controlled. It's not nothing new, Mr. JP. Nothing new there. Thanks for the insight.
Let's go to Amin Rafi. Do you think it's a problem that MicroStrategy owns so much Bitcoin and bought it on debt?
Yeah. My video cut out there. I was speaking two truths.
Yeah. India, shut him down.
Like, we can't have this on air. Some people think like this. Jesus. Do I think it's a problem? I think it is. I think any person or company holding a lot of anything, whether it's gold, silver, means that they can influence that market. Now, it could be grains of rice, it could be oil, it could be lithium, it could be Bitcoin, it could be whatever. And that's why it's always of interest to take control of the large reserves, whether it's lithium, oil, whatever it is. And hence why we have wars. And the other point of it is that with Bitcoin being in the hands of MicroStrategy, he could be a Bitcoin fan all he wants. We saw Elon Musk, right, do the same thing with Dogecoin, and then he moved on from there without really caring. I don't even know why that wasn't investigated. That's kind of like insider training. But I think it's a problem. I don't like top-down strategies at all. I really am a big fan of bottom-up strategies. But this is the nature of things. I'm not a communist-minded person to think that wealth should be spread equally to every person on the planet, because we know statistically that ends up back in the hands of a few in not too much of a long time. So yeah, I'm not a fan, but yeah, I can't stop nature. So that's just how it works.
Victoria Jones, does he own too much?
I mean, the thing is, I think Bitcoin's pretty well distributed. I know there are still a number of whales and there are still a collection in a number of big hands at the moment. But I think in the scheme of things, because of the way in which Satoshi designed the protocol, with the majority of them already having been issued, anyone who comes in later in the game is going to have a much harder job of catch up. And of course, a lot of the really big holders are ones who were in even earlier than Michael Saylor. I mean, he only really took a big interest in it in 2020, and Bitcoin had been around for about 11 years by then. I mean, the thing is, he's got big pockets. I think the issue with this particular article is the fact that he's buying it on leverage, and I think from that particular perspective, JPMorgan has a very good point, because ultimately, the biggest weakness in the existing financial system is the leverage. Everything's leveraged, property's leveraged, governments are leveraged. When it breaks, it's going to be when the debt market breaks that's a problem. And so anyone who's holding a lot of debt, while it may well be a great strategy at the moment at which that house of cards falls apart, he could actually find himself in a very weak position, a little bit like I mentioned earlier. If all of his debt is US denominated, and the only way of paying that back is US dollars, but the banks have all shut and the only way of getting US dollars is to sell his Bitcoin, then yeah, he may well have Bitcoin, but it may actually be equal to his debt. So, I think there's still so much to play out here. We're just in the first innings of this game. And I think when the financial system breaks, that's when things will really start to get interesting. And a lot of these holders, it may well be that they're in a powerful position right now, but at the same time, they're in a powerful position. They're overplaying their hand. They're taking advantage of the strength that they have right now. Whereas, Bitcoin takes us into a whole new world where there's a whole new set of rules. And so the people who've won using the old set of rules will find themselves at a disadvantage unless they've started to tweak their understanding of the world in terms of, how that new system is going to be set up. So, and this is the beauty of Bitcoin, the game theory surrounding it, it turns the way in which the existing financial system works completely on its head. And that's what makes it interesting. And so, I don't feel intimidated by any of these people having more Bitcoin, because unless you've got the right attitude and the right strategy, you're still vulnerable to making big mistakes going forward.
Michael Saylor makes all the conferences, talks to businesses, makes the tweets. He's in all the memes. It seems like he's good for Bitcoin, but he lives on leverage. What do you think, Rigel? Is Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy bad for Bitcoin?
I mean, I think I'd echo a lot of what Victoria said. There's definitely some Icarus-like elements to this, and that he's not the first person to think that he's a genius and he's figured out Bitcoin and eventually fly too close to the sun and get a comeuppance for the hubris of believing that you have. So I mean, it seems to me to be, there's that element about the leverage, but the other one is, the biggest issue to me is MicroStrategy is a American company incorporated in the United States. And my problem with having a large amount of Bitcoins is that if you're a legally regulated entity, you can't just come and take it, right? You can't have a boating accident and, I've lost my Bitcoins, right? Which is I think a lot of people are, again, there's some hubris about this whole idea, right? So really, as far as I'm concerned, those Bitcoins are the US government's Bitcoins, because if Bitcoin ever became a systemic risk to the financial system, which if it keeps succeeding, it will, of course, they're just going to confiscate these Bitcoins, right? And what is MicroStrategy going to do? They're not going to jump on a pirate ship and go to China or somewhere else, right? They're going to hand those over. Otherwise, they're all going to jail. So, this is my problem with it being distributed in any geographic place in any one spot as much as possible. Obviously, MicroStrategy, I just checked, has 205,000 Bitcoins, I think, at the moment. That's a lot more than most of the things. And I think a better world would be that some more equally distributed. But, as people said, it's Bitcoin is kind of really free market, pure free market stuff. And at some point, some guy with a lot of money is going to realize this makes a lot of sense and jump ahead of a lot of other people that just don't have the resources to do that. So I don't think this is unexpected. It was always going to play out this way, right? Some rich guy was going to try and front run this and get ahead and get way too much. But, something that just makes him a target eventually. And what we probably see is this changes hands many, many times over many, many years as people, eventually we end up in a more equal distribution just through the way of the law of the jungle, if you like, about
people eventually figuring out you don't want to be too much of a big target either.
Well, it's been a long time in this space. I think we'll go to Michael Carter. I remember back in the day, there was a con scam called Pirate at 40. That guy would buy Bitcoin for you and hold it. If I was going to start a company, I think I would have started a company where you buy Bitcoin and hold it. Seems like a good idea. But now MicroStrategy's actually done it, and it might be a threat. Carter, what do you think?
I mean, I think we got to see some of this almost play out with the FTX failure, right? He had leverage positions on Bitcoin. He bought Bitcoin. Bitcoin dropped from 30s all the way down. At that time, it was right. I think he bought it at 34, and it dropped all the way down to 16. Right? There was margin calls at 20. He went and got more financing to cover the position. So I mean, I think somebody at that scale with his resources, look at the liquidation risk, look at the volatility, look at all these aspects. The more systemic issue that folks have been kind of keying on is the more larger economy having more existential issues and maybe hyperinflation kind of stuff. I'm going to tell you, if we get into that, not, some people would say not if, but when, we're not going to be talking about MicroStrategy's Bitcoin position. There's so much more impactful than even Bitcoin if the financial system collapses, which I think it's going to be stages, and then I think it'll be propped, and then there'll be stages, and then certain things will start to look different later. If we had full financial collapse, Bitcoin's not going to be on the conversation, right? There's way more involved in this space than just Bitcoin to have that kind of systemic risk. So, I think that it is a risk. I think they've calculated that risk. I think they've borrowed with that in mind. Nobody knows what the price of Bitcoin is, but I think that they have a calculated, with backups and plans before they would start to have to liquidate their Bitcoin. The math is, though, that if it gets to so low of a point and they start getting margin called on it, and then there's a selling off of those Bitcoin assets to start to cover that position, it's kind of one of those magnifying losses, right, that happen in some of these things when they get too over leveraged. Kind of how Wall Street Bets did to Melvin Capital, right? They took positions and they murdered them. The retail market took them out. So there can be, and that's part of, I think, if we've seen anything, that's part of I would call it, the bigger boys get into this space, especially with some of the regulatory stuff that's kind of green lighting them. The more systemic risk is that you do get somebody much bigger than MicroStrategy coming in there. Maybe it is the BlackRock's first venture with the ETF, that they really start putting some pretty heavy calls on there, drive price way up, cause a vacuum to kind of come up with it. Then people take more margin and more risk, and then you have a collapse down from, let's say, $250,000 Bitcoin price back down to 50. The margin calls on that are going to be a lot more heavy. Not saying that the 73 to, let's say, it goes back down to 20,000 isn't going to be impactful. It absolutely would, but I think it's a whole different game when we start really getting into larger multiples. Who knows, with inflation, maybe that won't matter, but and those numbers won't add up to dollars versus now versus later. But I think that it's not a current risk. I think that they're probably playing the tables to where they're mitigating that. But yes, I think that in any major market shift or condition could definitely put him at risk. Anytime you take margin, that's part of the game. I just think that's where it's at. And I think that MicroStrategy is not going to be the only one doing this. I think we're going to start to see a lot more companies start to get into that margin, which is going to be one of, I think, the key drivers of pushing it up past that $200,000, $300,000 price point.
As Carter was saying, if you want to learn about leverage, check out the excellent movie Dumb Money about the GameStop stock situation and the retail buyers. It's very funny. The guy even has this microphone. I didn't even know it at the time when I bought it, but I like the movie. It's a good movie. But we're running out of time, so let's go to predictions or story of the week. Victoria Jones, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, my story of the week is a continuation of the one I had last time I was on, which is the Bitcoin Fest that we're putting together in Nottingham. It's the first time I've really been involved in helping to organize behind the scenes. And my contribution is I'm going to be organizing the live stream as well as speaking at the event. And so we're trying to build up some momentum by I've started doing some live streaming on my YouTube channel, which is Satoshi's page. So we're looking for more subscribers. So if there's anyone on here who hasn't subscribed yet, who'd like to support us, if you want to come over to my YouTube channel, Satoshi's page, and yeah, Thomas is showing the poster for the Bitcoin Fest in Nottingham. We're all looking forward to that, and yeah, we've got 500 tickets available, 100 tickets for VIPs, which are almost sold out, and it's still 3 to 4 weeks before it actually starts. So yeah, really looking forward to that.
Very cool. And that's April 6th, 2024. And just Google Bitcoin Fest Nottingham. Should come right up. Thanks, Victoria. Let's go to Rigel for a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead.
Oh man, on the spot. You've covered all the stories of the week. I feel like, so I'm just trying to think of what I can cover off. I guess you gotta just go with like a prediction, man, and say that I would think that what are we gonna get? What are we gonna say? Bitcoin is going to top out in this cycle at around $300,000. There you go. No, nothing to back that up. Just you put me on the spot. There's my guess.
It is written in stone. We will call you about it later.
As good as any of the other methodologies, right? So,
absolutely. Thank you, Rigel. Excellent prediction. Let's go to Carter from Bits Be Tripping. Prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead.
It's a great one. A prediction. I think that we're going to see some interesting developments from regulatory front. I think there's a lot of this is election year, and I can start to see some of that narrative of how the crypto space in general. We've already seen a couple things come out where there was some some government anti ETFs for like Ethereum. I think there's going to be some more stuff coming around that scope that may have some effect on us. Both from a positive standpoint, maybe some upcoming election folks in the US that might have some effect there. So I think we're going to start to see some more of that discussion happening on what's going to be next. Is it going to be FINRA, CFTC, who's going to be providing some new guidance?
Excellent prediction. And be sure to check out all of Carter's work with Bits Be Tripping, where he's been covering Bitcoin mining as long as I've been doing Mad Bitcoin. So back to 2013 or earlier. He's doing some incredible stuff now with kind of more industrial mining, large scale, lots of miners, much bigger than graphics cards now. But shout outs to Bits Be Tripping. Carter, is there anywhere they can follow you or your webpage, something like that?
Yeah. So bitsbetrippin.io is our site. We've been expanding. We're up to 9 people now. We have 4 sites. We just the stuff that's been on YouTube and on Twitter. I try to do a daily vlog teaching. It's kind of like the what can I show from a lessons learned, sometimes things that have failed and how we have fixed them. That kind of stuff is what I kind of show. Just in the life experience in the Bitcoin mining space. I think we made channels really close to each other. I was December of 2013, but had been mining and sharing stuff since late 2010 on Bitcoin Talk. So I've been around for quite a long time on this space, but love to share most all the content I put out there. Not shilly or any kind of, stuff like that. It's just like, here's a journey that we're on Bitcoin mining, and maybe we can share something that can help you guys.
And I don't know the details, but Carter and his company, they're putting in Bitcoin miners at power facilities. So it's the kind of thing we always hoped would happen, and it's actually happening, and they're one of the groups pushing it forward. Yeah.
We put some containers on actual power plants, which was an interesting journey, because that's critical infrastructure in the US. But it's, we've had, attorney generals down. We've had folks there that, to understand. A lot of it's been just through education, and some of those things really help in communities and local areas, hiring locally, and just trying to bring people to an understanding. It's kind of like the gateway that we're using to educate people on Bitcoin in general, the security of the network, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're doing it mostly in the US, but help with projects all over that you've seen. It was just in Germany a few weeks ago, and we're kind of all over. So it's a great journey. It's fun.
Excellent.
But
Thanks so much.
how do you get
for
the
joining
chickens
us, Carter.
laying again, though? Sorry. How do you get the chickens laying again? Apparently, last week we did a story about that some mining farm disrupting the chickens laying their eggs. People were whinging.
We've had definitely some interesting concerns. I mean, from everything from, is this going to heat up our particular city? To and I'm like, well, thermodynamics don't really work that way. But there's definitely been sound stuff that we've had to do, and we try to educate people like what we've went through to try to kind of demystify some of that. I've always encouraged local government and states to come down and see what we're doing, just to ensure that they're a participant in supporting, the local development of those situations, and then using a lot of stranded power. So like where we're at, they had a lot of government earmarked dollars that made a lot of windmills because of a lot of green energy stuff. And when you drive up and down where we're at, they're all off. There's no demand, and they haven't built the transmission to move it because that's very time consuming. So it's one of those things where it's like, hey, all that those tax dollars and everything that was raised to do that, let's turn those on and actually balance the network with these. So we're able to do that here locally in Illinois. But there's a lot more to do. So yeah, trying to work within the frameworks and then educate on top of it. But yeah, there's very interesting things that do come up when you're trying to get zoning and stuff.
Yeah.
It is funny, as Josh was saying, last week on the show, we talked about how perhaps because it's called mining, people think that Bitcoin mining is dirtier than, say, having a Google data center in your town, and that there's kind of a reactionary element to this. But you guys can check out last week's episode for more on that. Josh, a Gala prediction or a story of the week?
No, I mean, I think just in following the Craig Wright stuff, which is interesting for me personally. It's good to have a finality on that side of, and but what's really interesting now, I feel that he needs to appeal this, because otherwise he goes to prison, or he needs to sign, or something needs to happen. And so yeah, where this is going, and it's so interesting seeing the Bitcoin SV community still making excuses for the guy. Like, it doesn't matter what happens, there's always like, oh well, he's just tricking them or whatever. Like, he actually wanted the court case to go like this, because that way he, like, no guys, you've been hoodwinked for a long time, and you've got this thing called cognitive dissonance, where it hurts to admit to yourself that you've been fooled. But anyway, yeah, so that's just my story of the week.
And last but not least, let's go to Amin Rafi for a prediction or a story of the week. Go ahead, Amin.
Yeah, so first, good to see you, Josh. Been a while, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I've just been focused on privacy. So I'm going to be launching a privacy summit somewhere along the second half of the year. I also have the business Unchained Innovations, UNCHAINED innovations.io. Where we support privacy through devices. So we have a lot of phones, laptops, routers, privacy course, one-on-one tutorial, one-on-one coaching, and things like that. And people that pay with Bitcoin get 10% off. And now the next stage that we want to go to is doing the privacy summit, because we see that there's a lot of mess out there where things are not coherent, or they're just take-minded people speaking, like an echo chamber, so to say. And that's kind of our vision for this year. So quite focused on that. And in terms of prediction, I predict that there will be a Black Swan event at some stage this year. I don't know when, but it will be some stage this year. That's my prediction.
Well, I hope that means the price is going up. But we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait.
Yes, sir.
Not financial advice. My story of the week is I've been reading again. I went to the bookstore and I lucked out. I found a cool book to read. I really enjoyed the movie and the book, The Martian, by Andy Weir. And now, thanks to some wandering through the bookstore, I found his newest work, Project Hail Mary. It's very similar to The Martian. It's very sciencey. If you like The Martian, you'll probably like Project Hail Mary. So check that out. Now I've moved on to his previous, but also new to me book called Artemis. And it's about a moon base. Imagine if we had 2,000 people living on the moon. Sounds like fun. So if you want some sciencey books, check out Andy Weir, author of The Martian, who wrote Project Hail Mary and Artemis. Thanks to everybody for joining us. We're running out of time. Until next time, bye.